So I wanted to talk about why your body is hurting quite so much and more than you're used to at this point in time. So we're at the point where gyms are now reopening, classes are going back, we're doing different things, and but our bodies potentially the feedback that we're getting in clinic are that they're absolutely screaming at us, and that we're suffering perhaps more than we used to. So what I want to talk about is why that's the case and the 4 things that you can make sure that you're doing in order to make sure that you're preventing this as much as possible. So I hate to use this word because I know it's used all the time at the moment, but what we've gone through is obviously unprecedented. The times that we find ourselves in, but what's happened now is we've all been either one of 2 people in my experience during this period. We've been people who have really perhaps done more exercise during that lockdown period and really gone for it. But even if this is the case, this is going to be a different sort of exercise to perhaps what we were doing before. Or we've been somebody who just hasn't exercised during lockdown. And in my sort of clinical experience, speaking to people at the moment, it seems that the majority of people are in this second part, that perhaps we've done less exercise during lockdown because things have been closed and we've been unable to get to the gym and places. Now, obviously, that's been frustrating, but the good news is that they are now reopen, and our desire is to dive straight back into those things. But what's happening as a result is our bodies are screaming at us and telling us that they're perhaps suffering more than we remember suffering before lockdown. So why is this the case? Well, we've had this huge period of time away from exercise. So what our body does is our body's very clever at adapting to the demands that we put that through. So, and it's what we're in now is a state of shock for the body, going back into these exercise levels, because what we're looking to do is go straight back into where we left off. But what we had done in the period before we left off was built our body up to that point that the body was used to coping with those demands. Now, unfortunately, because it hasn't been used to coping with those demands during the lockdown period, what is now happening is that perhaps as a result, our body is kind of going into shock mode, and you're noticing some soreness as a result, some damage as a result of these things. Now, the good news is that our body will go through a stage of reconditioning as long as we keep up this exercise to get back to where we need it to be. If we put it another way, if we imagine if we're looking to lose weight or something, our initial progress can be very quick, and then it becomes harder as we go through because the body is shocked into a state. And this is what's happening at the moment. We're shocked into this state, and the body's almost going into protection mode, and isn't quite strong enough for those demands, and that's why we're noticing the damage. But what can we do about this is the most important thing, because as I say, what I don't want you to do is to stop doing these exercises, stop going to the gym. We want to just go through a stage where we build ourselves back to where the body is at the point it's strong enough to cope with those demands. And that's when we notice our soreness less. So the 4 key things that I want you to focus on in order to prevent this. Firstly is stretching. What the body will tend to do is to tighten as a result, to go into protection mode. So particularly when we're finishing our exercises, we want to be making sure that we're stretching out those tight muscles. So we're preventing a lack of flexibility or increased tightness, which will lead to increased soreness. So what you want to be making sure that you're doing is including daily stretching into your routine to make sure that you're sort of allowing yourself to remain flexible during these times as you build back your strength. Secondly would be myofascial release, so releasing out any tight muscle tissue. And we can do this in a few ways. You have massage, or you have self-myofascial release. And so this might be things that we know, such as rolling, or using things like a lacrosse ball. People who have heard me talk before will know I commonly talk about how great I think a lacrosse ball is for myofascial release work. But what we want to be doing is making sure that you can be doing that in a strategic way and targeting those sore areas to prevent these adhesions in the tissues that's coming about as a result of small damage, or what we call micro tears, from becoming problematic. And again, we have a video on our YouTube channel about how to roll effectively. So the first 2 points would be stretching and myofascial release. And these are really geared at just making sure that the tissue or our muscles are in a good state ready for this exercise. The next 2 things I want to talk about are around recovery following exercise. So the third thing would be protein. Now, protein is our supplement that allows us to grow our muscles, but also to repair any damaged muscle tissue. So now we are back in the stage where we're back in the gym, back exercising, back to doing what we want to be doing as a regular routine. We need to be making sure that we're helping our body. And a good way to do that is via things like protein. So we tend to think of things like protein shakes as a way of taking in protein. But even things like chocolate milk work very well as a recovery drink. So factoring that in, extra protein, or whether this comes from food or from like liquid substances, try and make sure that you're getting extra protein into your diet, so that we're making sure that we're allowing our body to recover and repair and build itself back up to the strength that we want it to be at. And finally, probably most controversially, I'm going to mention rest days. Now, what I mean by that, when I say rest days, I don't necessarily mean we need lots of days of not exercising, but we need to be strategic about our rest. If we are working a certain muscle group, particularly hard one day, and we're suffering with some damage as a result, we want to make sure that we're allowing at least a rest day before we then hit that same muscle group. Because we need to, the way the muscles work is that we effectively break them down to get back to being stronger. And that's why we're suffering quite so much at the moment, because we're having to break them down quite a bit in order to get them back to that strength. But we need to allow time for these adaptations to occur, because otherwise we're just going to be continually breaking them down. And at the end, it results in us breaking to the point of injury. So make sure that you are allowing some rest days of that muscle group. So it might be, for example, that it's active rest. It might be that you're just working a different muscle group, but make sure that you're strategic in your plan for rest days to allow for the adaptations to occur. So I hope that's been helpful. If your body is hurting more than normal, now you've returned to the gym or a different form of exercise than you were previously doing, it's completely normal, and it is the process we go through. If anything, take comfort in the fact that you know that your body's going to be adapting to become stronger to meeting those demands. But the 4 things I want you to think about and have a strategic plan for as part of your recovery process is, firstly, stretching. Secondly, myofascial release or massage. Thirdly, making sure that we're increasing our amount of protein that we're taking in. And fourthly, making sure that we're allowing for strategic rest days for certain muscle groups that have been worked. I hope that's been helpful. As ever, if you have any questions, please do feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to help. And keep up the good work.